Jason Walker reports on a high-tech controversy north of the border.
Police in Edmonton, Canada have started a pilot project using AI-equipped body cameras to detect faces on a high-risk watch list. Now, the move by Axon Enterprise has raised some ethical concerns, especially since the company previously paused facial recognition due to privacy issues. The pilot aims to enhance officer and public safety by identifying individuals flagged for a history of serious offenses. Jason Walker reporting.
The College Football Playoff Selection Committee's decision in 2025 has sparked controversy. Notre Dame was dropped from the playoff despite not playing last week. Their August loss to Miami was cited as a key factor. Notre Dame's athletic director criticized the committee's inconsistent ranking methodology. More of these stories at srnnews.com.
From God's Word, the Bible, there is this call to defend the truth. Jude, verse 3. Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. A message from God's Word in Jude, verse 3.
Have you felt your life is so far gone that there's no hope? Listen to life-changing stories on Unshackled, 7 days a week at 4:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. Central. That's right here on VCY America.
VCY America is on the air. KBCX Gregory, WVIW Bridgeport. Online at vcyamerica.org.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
On this day, December 8th, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln announced his plan of pardon for the South. He wrote, "Whereas it is desired by some persons engaged in said rebellion to resume their allegiance to the United States, I, Abraham Lincoln, proclaim a full pardon upon the condition that every such person take an oath, to wit, I do solemnly swear in the presence of Almighty God that I will henceforth faithfully support, protect, and defend the Constitution, and that I will faithfully support all proclamations of the President made during the existing rebellion having reference to slaves. So help me God."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, since President Trump took office, there is a new direction that's been taken as it relates to public information and vaccinations, and it's coming by the new director or the Secretary of Health. Questions that have been long asked by organizations are now being raised by those with decision-making authority, and some of those decisions have been made, and there's backlash. We'll be getting into a number of issues today pertaining to mRNA vaccinations, the flu shot, the vaccination schedule for newborns, and more. Joining us today, we welcome back Barbara Lowe Fisher. She is president of the National Vaccine Information Center. They're a nonprofit charity that she co-founded with parents of DPT vaccine-injured children back in 1982. They're a national grassroots movement and public information campaign to institute vaccine safety reforms and informed consent protections in the public health system. She has researched and analyzed and publicly articulated the major issues involving the science, the policy, laws, ethics, and politics pertaining to vaccinations, and is one of the nation's leading non-medical consumer advocacy experts on the subject here. And Barbara, thanks so much for joining us on Crosstalk.
Well, thank you for having me again. It's so much happening.
Oh, there is, and we're gonna have you address so many things, because some of the things we're going to talk about today, for year after year after year, you've been calling for, and now finally we're seeing some action taking place.
That's right. This is a really historic moment in terms of vaccine policy making in this country, and it's happening because Robert Kennedy Jr. was appointed to the Secretary of HHS, and he has moved very quickly in trying to do what the parents of vaccine-injured children have been asking him to do, asking the government to do for 4 decades, and that is to do the science, the good science that will give us an evidence base, a scientific evidence base for these policies, these one-size-fits-all vaccine policies that we believe have harmed a lot of children because they just were not willing to do the kind of science that needed to be done. And now, finally, there's a movement, and not only in terms of looking at the science, but also immediately taking steps to change policy that's not supported by current science.
So we're going to unfold a lot, and let's begin working. We've got a long list of topics here, and maybe you could clear up on what some are saying is confusing information on the Pfizer mRNA flu shot. NBC News reporting the flu shot is outperforming the standard flu vaccine in their late-stage trials. That's Pfizer's mRNA. And they quote the New England Journal of Medicine, and then we also have LifeSite News covering the same issue, but indicating the mRNA flu shot from Pfizer has been linked to some pretty serious, dire events, especially to seniors, more likely diagnosed with kidney disease or acute respiratory failure. And they also look at this New England Journal of Medicine, help us understand what's going on.
Well, I think to put this whole issue of the mRNA vaccines in perspective, of course, we know what happened with the mRNA COVID shots. 1.6 million adverse events reported to the vaccine adverse event reporting system in this country after those shots. This mRNA technology that they used for the COVID shots it was an experimental technology. It was rushed to market, and we know that the origins of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID disease, we know now pretty sure that it was lab created, that it was something that they were working on over in China. They were working on it here in our country, and it got out of that lab, and it is so this spike protein that's at the heart of this technology, which is basically a synthetic protein, is the basis for the mRNA vaccines. They call them vaccines, but they're really biological products that are different from the vaccines we've been using for many, many years. So just to quote a former official at FDA, he says, "I don't advocate the mRNA vaccines anymore because as you get to the idea of vaccine injury, when I give you an mRNA vaccine, what I do is I turn your body into a spike protein production factory. And spike protein is a very immunotoxic protein." So when you're looking at the Pfizer study that was published in New England Journal of Medicine, and they talk about how, well, we got a great immune response, much better than the flu vaccines that we're using now by using this mRNA technology. What they're not telling you is that this spike protein is immunotoxic, and what it does is it ramps up your immune system to have a hyper inflammatory response. That's what vaccines do. They create an inflammatory response in your body. If you, for example, are not able, for genetic or biological reasons, to resolve inflammation in the body, you are going to potentially have a real problem. They found in this study that, yes, the vaccine, the mRNA technology used in this vaccine elicited a much more robust immune response. Mm-hmm. But in people over 65, what it did is it was associated with kidney damage.
Wow.
And respiratory problems. And in fact, when you look at it, 70% of the people in the vaccinated group in that trial had local reactions. 65% had systemic events. That's things like a fever, joint pain, headache, and severe fatigue, those kinds of things. And that is a very high reaction profile. So whereas the lead was, these mRNA, this flu shot is much more effective, they weren't talking about how reactive it was.
Yeah. And even without the mRNA, isn't the flu vaccine or the flu shot a guessing game every year as to what strains it's going to address?
Oh, yes. If you go on the CDC website, you can see a chart that talks about how, in terms of effectiveness, it's less than 50% effective for, over 15 years. It has a very, very questionable effectiveness. I mean, it's reactive. The leading vaccine in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, the leading number of awards are for influenza vaccine. So when you try to make a benefit-risk analysis, you're talking about a vaccine that has very low effectiveness, but certainly can cause injury.
So are patients told that in advance, the efficacy of the flu shot?
No, not really. I mean, the vaccine information statements that are given, that are published by the CDC, and doctors under the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act are supposed to give to people before vaccination, really don't tell the whole truth to people about what the risk and the effectiveness is.
Yeah, most people are just, do you want the flu shot? Or, we have the flu shot, you're ready for the flu shot, but without going into any details pertaining to it.
Right, and so you really have to do your own research. This is why the National Vaccine Information Center has a lot of information on our website at nvic.org about diseases and vaccines, and we tell people about effectiveness and risk.
That's one of many topics here. Barbara, here's another. There have been divergent views on any linkage between vaccinations and autism. The CDC has denied any such link, and now we have the new Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy, directing them, hey, you need to update your webpage, correct what they've been saying in the past, that they've said vaccines don't cause autism. He wants them to make correction on that, address the debate that's been going on and on this matter of the connection between autism and vaccines.
Yes, well, it takes a lot of courage to bite the bullet and actually put up information on the CDC website that tells the truth. And the truth is that the studies, the methodologically sound studies have not been done to definitively show whether or not vaccines cause autism. Now, we believe that there's been enough studies in animals and humans to suggest that vaccines cause encephalopathy, encephalitis and encephalopathy, brain inflammation and permanent brain dysfunction that can take the form of autism. In other words, autism is basically a constellation of symptoms that demonstrate brain and immune system dysfunction. And so people like to pigeonhole that word autism and say, well, vaccines don't cause autism. And the truth is the studies have not been done properly. So right now, the vaccine page that talks about autism on the CDC's website says that the statement that vaccines do not cause autism is not based on evidence because it doesn't rule out the possibility that infant vaccines are linked to the disorder. The page also has been updated to suggest that health officials have ignored studies showing a potential link. Now, in 2013, the Institute of Medicine, National Academy of Sciences, published a report that looked at the early childhood vaccine schedule, that is from newborn to age 6. And they concluded that there had not been enough studies done to rule out that autism is caused by vaccines. In other words, they don't know. Now, this controversy about the association between autism and vaccines actually goes back to 1985. Harris Coulter and I were the first to suggest in our book, DPT, A Shot in the Dark, that vaccines could cause brain inflammation that takes the form of autism. The Institute of Medicine has first said there's no causal link. And they said that in 1991. But then as time went on, they talked a lot about brain inflammation. and the different types of symptoms that can be associated with permanent brain dysfunction as a consequence of brain inflammation. And so they've been trying to avoid really doing these studies. Let's face it, most of the research in this country is funded by the pharmaceutical industry through universities and also through the government through NIH grants. And what Secretary Kennedy is trying to do is get money devoted to looking at demonstrating whether or not that childhood vaccine schedule is safe and whether or not all of these different types of disorders and disabilities that have been skyrocketing in our child population over the last 30 to 40 years is associated with giving them too many vaccines too early.
Yeah, too early. And you have warned, I know we're just going to introduce this now. We have a break coming up in just a minute, but you've warned for a long time on the number of, these combined vaccinations that infants are receiving in a short period of time. And President Trump has spoken on this, but this past Friday, he signed a memo to align U.S. childhood vaccine recommendations with best practices in developed nations. He said he wants HHS and the CDC to review best practices in peer developed countries. Your response to that?
No, I mean, this is long overdue. U.S. is an outlier in terms of how many vaccines we give our children and giving them so early, so many and so early. When I first got into this work, after my son had a severe reaction to the wholesale DPT vaccine in 1980, and I started the work in 82, there were only 7 vaccines: diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, DPT, measles, mumps, and rubella, MMR, and the oral polio vaccine. We now have 72 doses of 17 vaccines.
We're going to pick up with that right after the break. Friends, that is an amazing increase in the number of vaccines and doses that are given to young children. Barbara Lowe Fisher with us from the National Vaccine Information Center, nvic.org, their site. We'll be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, popular creation speaker and author with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, this might seem simple, but where did music come from?
Chris, music is an integral part of being in the image of God. The early chapters of Genesis reveal that just within a few generations of creation, men were constructing musical instruments, both wind instruments and string instruments. Soon we see that even this was perverted. Lamech, one of the patriarchs, even sang a song boasting of his adventures and murderous prowess. Musical instruments have been found from soon after the flood. Even Neanderthal fossils are found in conjunction with musical instruments. You see, Chris, the evidence that we find supports the biblical truth of creation. Even music started back in Genesis.
For more information on the foundational principles set forth in Genesis, simply visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
Vaccination updates in the news. Our topic today with Barbara Lowe Fisher. She is president of the National Vaccine Information Center. Again, their site is nvic.org. So, Barbara, just before the break, we were talking about the massive increase in the number of vaccinations and doses that from newborns, young childhood that they are receiving. Again, just review those numbers, because someone said, did she not speak correctly there? 7 vaccines before, now close to 72 doses? What's this all about?
Yeah, no, it was when my children were being vaccinated back in the 70s and 80s, there were literally only 7 vaccines on the list, and they were given between 2 years and 6 years of age. 2 months old and 6 years old. Now, since 1991, the first dose of vaccine has been given to almost all babies in this country at 12 hours of age in the newborn nursery. The hepatitis B vaccine, which we opposed in 1991, we said we don't have cases. This country is not endemic in terms of hepatitis B. Southeast Asia, very high circulation of hepatitis B, but not in this country. And so it was really questionable to say that every single baby born, even if born to hepatitis B negative mothers, of which most mothers are in this country, that they have to get hepatitis B vaccine at 12 hours of age? There was no reason for it, and yet that policy has been in place for 30 years. Well, because Robert Kennedy replaced the old guard members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at the CDC, got new advisors in there who actually are committed to looking at the science. This week, historic, they recommended to not have the birth dose of hepatitis B given to all babies born to hepatitis B negative mothers. They still recommended that for hepatitis B positive mothers, those babies get the vaccine to try to prevent chronic hepatitis B infection. So it's a more nuanced, more logical policy. Well, the pharmaceutical companies, medical trade organizations, they're furious. And one of the reasons they're furious is that what that hepatitis B birth dose did, in addition to giving them a guaranteed market every year of all newborn babies, was that in 1995, Donna Shalala in the Clinton administration appropriated the Social Security number for the first time for a non-Social Security purpose. And that was that at birth, the babies would be enrolled in state vaccine tracking systems using that number. Now, whether or not they're still using the Social Security number, I think they still are, but the point is that they wanted those babies tracked from birth in state vaccine tracking systems, which, of course, are linked up to information on a national tracking system, electronic tracking systems. So, over the last 3 to 4 decades, we've seen this strengthening of the vaccination infrastructure to make sure that every single child gets every single dose of every single ACIP, CDC-recommended vaccine that the federal government recommends. And when they recommend a vaccine for universal use, like this birth dose of hepatitis B vaccine in 1991, that is a signal to the states to mandate the vaccine in daycare and for school attendance, and that's exactly what happened. Wow. In the last 3 to 4 decades, every single time the ACIP has recommended a vaccine for children for universal use, we're now up to 72 doses of 17 vaccines, it has been turned in, most of the time, turned into a requirement at the state level.
And so, therefore, since this historic vote just took place on the CDC on hepatitis B, does each individual state have to go back now and change their records or their laws on this?
Well, here's what's happening. The medical trade organizations are furious. The ones that represent doctors, nurses, public health officials, et cetera, they're furious about what happened this week. And what they're trying to do, and they've been upset about this change at HHS that Secretary Kennedy has made to try to get a handle on exactly what's happening with these children in vaccination. And so they're trying to tell go into the states and say, look, you need to ignore the ACIP committee, the new ACIP committee. You need to ignore what those federal recommendations are because they know it's all going to change. You need to follow our recommendations like the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American College of Obstetricians and Physicians. You need to put into your laws that you're going to follow our policy, which is, of course, to not make any change, to stay with it.
And so the battle ensues.
So it's all in flux, and that's why NVIC does a lot of work at the state level. We have been on the ground in the states, particularly since 2010, trying to protect the right of people to make voluntary vaccination decisions, which means not only holding the line on exemptions, but actually we called in August for no state vaccine mandates. Our position is there should be no mandates. Why? Because they haven't done the science, and also because it's a matter of autonomy, the right to informed consent to medical risk-taking, which is an ethical principle that underpins the ethical practice of medicine, and because the medical trade and pharmaceutical companies and public health officials have way too much power, way too much say over what we put in our bodies and the bodies of our children. We need to be free to make independent, informed, voluntary decisions about vaccination and indeed any other medical intervention.
Now, Barbara, you just said that they haven't done the science on this, and yet that's what they're accusing Robert F. Kennedy, that this is all political, that he's not following the science. We've got the science behind this, and he's getting rid of all of these people that are behind the sound science.
And that is just what they're saying. I mean, I watched the 2 days of meetings this last week, and I was just astonished as they kept saying, that ones that were protesting kept saying over and over again, you don't have any science to show harm. Well, they haven't done the science. They won't do the science to investigate, and there is evidence of harm. We have had compensation in the vaccine injury compensation system awarded. We've had reports in the vaccine adverse event reporting system over the years. There has been medical literature published, but they don't want to look, a few studies, okay, a few, but they don't want to look at the emerging evidence that these vaccines are causing far more adverse events than they have been willing to admit. And that's what Secretary Kennedy is trying to do. He's trying to get to the bottom of it, do the science, and let the science speak.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, a policy like this, where you are giving a vaccine at 12 hours of age when you know nothing about that child's immune status or neurological status, you know nothing about their genetics, you know nothing about whether or not they are vulnerable to having an adverse response to an artificial stimulation of the immune system, an inflammatory response you are creating. They don't know. And so first do no harm is appropriate here, especially when their babies are born to hepatitis B negative mothers. Most women are tested. Many times, most women are tested when they come into the hospital to give birth. And so if you target, you have a more personalized approach rather than a shotgun approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that only is common sense.
So going back to the president's memo from this past Friday then, and aligning our childhood vaccination recommendations with best practices in developed nations, and he talked about best practices in pure developed countries, are you anticipating there's going to be some other changes coming forth as well?
No question. I mean, because he's going to look at the whole childhood schedule, and he's going to look at vaccine ingredients. He's going to get down, his pledge is he's going to get down to the bottom of this debate that's been going on for decades now about whether the increasing childhood vaccine schedule is contributing to the increases in chronic disease and disability. I mean, I started talking about this way back in the 80s, and really the 90s is when I really started talking about it. And, we cannot continue business as usual when we have so many sick kids, chronically ill kids. The autism issue alone is going to have all of these children who have severe autism. Not every child has severe autism, because autism is just like brain injury, can cause a spectrum of symptoms of dysfunction, brain dysfunction, and immune dysfunction. Autism is on a spectrum. And so you can have the milder, you can have Asperger's, which is pretty high-functioning individuals. They still have features of autism. But you have the severe and profound. They'll never be able to produce in society. They'll never be able to live on their own. They will need lifelong care. Who is going to take care of those children as adults, especially when their parents pass on? This is a disaster in the making, and we cannot continue to turn a blind eye.
Barbara Lowe Fisher with us today on Crosstalk. Let's hit another issue, and this is recently we have an official of the FDA indicating at least 10 children died from the recommended COVID-19 shots, and it's a remarkable admission. I mean, at the same time, we have those that are saying, yes, but many more children would have died without the COVID shots. If you could comment on this issue as well.
Another sort of historic event that happened at HHS last month, and that is that Dr. Prasad, who is an official at the FDA, decided to have an investigation of deaths associated with the COVID shot. and he started with the children. We know from adults that have had myocarditis has been causally associated with the COVID shot, the mRNA COVID shots particularly.
Mm-hmm.
But he decided to look at the reports of deaths in children after receiving COVID shots. And remember, children were the least likely to have a bad course with COVID. It was mostly the elderly that were really having a bad course with the COVID disease. So he has described this study or this investigation as a profound revelation, because he found that at a minimum, 10 deaths of children were related to the COVID vaccine. But he basically indicated it was just the tip of the iceberg. And he went further. He wrote this memo to the FDA staff, and he basically talked about the cover-up that occurred at the FDA under the previous administration. That they knew that cases of myocarditis were which is heart inflammation, were associated with deaths, and they just basically covered it up. They didn't tell the people for several years. They didn't admit that there was a problem with heart inflammation. And now, to admit that there were children who died, that's never been done before at HHS.
Yeah.
It really hasn't. They, at all costs, do not want to admit that the vaccines can cause death. And so this is just the beginning. Of course, the manufacturers of the mRNA product, Moderna and Pfizer, are protesting and saying there's no evidence. We've studied it. There's no evidence. But for me, I've been here all these years. If they had listened to the parents of DPT vaccinated children, when we rang the warning bell back in the early 80s, and they had done the studies, we wouldn't have been in this situation with COVID vaccine. Instead, they marginalized us, they censored us, they tried to stop our voices. And so now we have this thing that happened during COVID, which was government in a massive cover-up of the harm done by the shots.
Friends, we'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Christian film writer, director, and producer Rich Cristiano has released 4 powerful films that motivate, encourage, and challenge believers. These also share an evangelistic message to the lost. VCY is offering the Cristiano 4-pack DVD set. The set includes Unidentified, which follows reporters as they cover the UFO issue only to be confronted by their eternal destiny. The Secrets of Jonathan Sperry, demonstrating the powerful impact a senior citizen has on young boys to reach others with the gospel. Play the Flute, which follows a youth leader who is put in charge of a teen group that is filled with spiritual apathy and finds himself in an uphill battle. And then A Matter of Faith, showing a Christian girl whose faith is challenged as she leaves for college. This 4-pack Cristiano set is available for $35 when you call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. In just a short while, we'll be opening up the phone lines to take your questions. So, friends, be formulating your questions right now in your mind, or write them down so you can call in, and it can be as precise and as quick as possible to get your question out for our guest. Again, we'll be opening lines here in just a short while. We're talking with Barbara Lowe Fisher. She is president of the National Vaccine Information Center. Their website is nvic.org. And friends, as she said, they are active on the state level, and you can follow them also at nvicadvocacy.org and sign up for alerts about what's happening in your state. For instance, Barbara, we just saw the state of West Virginia that gave the courts there saying that West Virginia must allow students religious exemptions to vaccination laws, something that had been denied them, and something that of course you have fought for as well, and so you inform those who are part of the advocacy portal when things like this are underway.
Yeah, I mean it's been a real fight in this country to try to save the exemptions. The problem is, the reason I called for an end of vaccine mandates, too, in the end of August, was that a lot of the medical exemptions have been narrowed so much that nothing qualifies as a medical exemption. So very few doctors will give a medical exemption because the health officials want everyone to get it, regardless of even if you've had a reaction. The religious exemption is in the same category. Many states require you to belong to a religion or a church that opposes vaccination. Of course, there are no churches that really predate vaccination, major religions. So they put people into a corner. It's kind of a bogus situation in terms of exemptions, and because they've narrowed them so much and required such a strict definition of what qualifies. And this is why you're seeing lawsuits on this issue. But the truth is that the state shouldn't be forcing you to belong to a certain religion in order to have an exemption. They shouldn't be doing that. Mm-hmm. They should allow everyone to have informed consent.
So we've been talking about this new awareness that's taking place, and now we have the Public Health Policy Journal reported that the COVID-19 vaccines and boosters, both those with mRNA and those that are non-mRNA, that they pose an increased risk of 6 types of cancer and a 27% higher risk of cancer overall, based on a study of over 8 million people conducted by South Korea. This is also significant, a new awareness coming out on that issue as well.
Well, yes, and I think a lot of people who follow this issue have been hearing about the turbo cancers. People who are healthy, they get these vaccines, this COVID shot, and they, particularly mRNA, but the DNA based ones also are a problem. Mm-hmm. And then they all of a sudden develop cancer, and it's not just a cancer that's slow moving, it's a turbo cancer. It moves very fast, mortality very quickly. And yes, this is a big study out of South Korea, 8 million people, as you said. Mm-hmm. And what they found was COVID-19 vaccines, whether mRNA or DNA-based, those are both genetically engineered vaccines, and the boosters are associated with a higher risk of breast, colorectal, gastric, lung, prostate, and thyroid cancer across all vaccine types and age groups. And I was looking in overall cancer, 27% higher risk for overall cancer, 20% higher risk for breast cancer, 28% higher risk for colorectal cancer, 34% higher risk for gastric cancer, 53% higher risk for lung cancer, 69% higher risk for prostate cancer, and 35% higher risk for thyroid cancer. Wow. This is a devastating report, really, and should be taken very seriously by all of the public health community. Like I said before, we need the proper research done. Mm-hmm. And little by little, I've seen since the COVID mess in the last 5 years, I'm seeing more journals being willing to publish studies that question the science, the evidence base that was used to rush these products to market.
Barbara, am I correct in saying that the COVID shot was given under emergency use authorization, and as such, the normal testing and the normal trials were not conducted, and so people who obtained the shot were never warned of this increased cancer risk? Is that accurate?
Well, they didn't study the Cancer Association, but you're right. This vaccine, this COVID biological, is the first time we have, on a mass basis, distributed a vaccine and promoted and first time federally mandated this biological product that had not been tested. It's under an emergency use authorization rather than normal testing procedures. They rush it to market in about 9 months, the mRNA product, and they cut corners. They did not do the full range of both animal studies, biological mechanism studies, and epidemiological studies that are usually required for a normal licensure. So for about a year, it was under emergency use authorization, and then slowly they licensed it for adults, and then for, I think, 16 years and older. But for a long time, the children, the young children were getting it under an EUA. So this was very sketchy. It wasn't done with the same protocols as the vaccines that sometimes take 10 years to get on the market.
Yeah.
So it's no wonder when you put an experimental product basically out there, you're basically testing it on the population. It's no wonder that all of a sudden we're seeing this evidence emerging that has caused much more harm than they assumed it would.
Friends, our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. We'll take your questions, be as precise, and get right to your point as you call 800-733-9829. And, Barbara, there's a story on the vaccine reaction that more pet owners are hesitant to vaccinate their animals. Why the concern?
Well, I mean, it's this new awareness since the COVID response to the COVID pandemic by government, and all of the information coming out about reactions in humans. It's now pet owners are starting to question when they take their pets in, do they need all these vaccines that have, again, like humans, the pets have to receive more and more vaccines. When I had a dog, and when I was a kid, I mean, it was rabies vaccine, then distemper vaccine. But we have many vaccines now for pets. And I think that the pet owners are also seeing the health of their pets deteriorate after they get round after round of vaccination. And they are, 26% of cat owners are vaccine hesitant. They did that study, published a study in 2024 in a veterinary journal, and then they found in 2023 that nearly 40% of dog owners believed that dog vaccines, canine vaccines, were unsafe. 20% thought they were ineffective. 30% thought they were medically unnecessary. So there is a kind of a spillover in the concern about vaccine safety and effectiveness among humans. Now, in terms of pet owners.
Wow. Our lines are packed already, and let's begin with the calls. Lily is calling from Arizona. Hi, Lily. You're on the air.
Oh, my question is for the lady. I heard something about Bill Gates patented the COVID vaccine way in 1998. I can't find any research to collaborate with that information. Does she know anything about that?
Okay.
No, I have not seen that early date with Bill Gates in terms of the COVID shot, the coronavirus vaccine. But I know that Gates, of course, was a big proponent of the COVID shot and mandates. He was in favor of very draconian measures in terms of limiting travel, lockdowns, and the mandate for the COVID shot. And I read recently that he is going to pivot from his interest in climate change advocacy. He's always been there, well, since the early 90s, actually, in terms of vaccination. But he wants to pay more attention now to vaccinating the world. He's the biggest private contributor to the World Health Organization in terms of vaccination and making sure that every single infant born in the world gets all the vaccines that the WHO and CDC want them to get.
He is infamous for saying if we do a real good job with vaccinations, we'll be able to save lives and limit the population, control the population. Thank you, Lily. We have Kiana in Menominee, Michigan calling. You're on the air.
Hello, sir. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to touch on these vaccines. My children were both injured from vaccinations, and just wanted to touch on how the nurses and the doctors aren't even educated on the ingredients inside of these vaccines. They only are aware about some of the active ingredients, and they definitely have no idea what the inactive ingredients are. I talked to the head of the nurse staff at my son's doctor's office, and they had no idea. The head nurse had no idea what was in there, but they're pushing it on these children and making the parents feel bad if they don't get it. And I just think that's not their place, and it's totally wrong. And now the children are suffering, and I suffer as a mother. I love my children dearly, but my oldest son has autism from this, and it's so hard to live life. And I think these vaccines are evil, and I really hope that something is done about it.
Thank you for the call, Barbara. Your response.
Yeah, I've heard this story over and over again over the years. Parents trust when they take their children into a doctor. They trust that the doctor knows about the risks and benefits of a medical intervention like a vaccine. And the truth is that they are not taught in medical school. I've heard this from doctors who have become enlightened, that the only thing they were taught in medical school was what vaccines to give and when. They were taught the schedule. They were not taught anything about immune function, about neurological reactions, about screening children out. They were just told to do it. And we knew this back. I remember marching in front of the CDC in 1986 and saying, you don't know how many children have become brain injured from DPT vaccine. You don't know. And we begged them to try to change the curriculum in medical schools to teach doctors about how to recognize a vaccine reaction and what vaccines contain, the ingredients vaccines contain. And we begged them to teach coroners about how to distinguish a vaccine death from a sudden infant syndrome death. And they admitted that they don't give the coroners any guidance. So we just don't know how many kids are being hurt by vaccines. That's the bottom line.
Thank you for the call. Brad in Edinburgh, Texas, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. My comment is I was injured by the COVID vaccine, and so was my little brother. And what I want to know from Barbara is, does she know if any of the current vaccines incorporate the use of the mRNA chemical?
Okay, tell you what, we're up against a break, so let's take the break. And thank you for the call. We'll have Barbara respond to that afterwards. Back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Recently, actor Kirk Cameron came out, made a shocking video talking about the fact he now believes in the idea that people go to hell for a period of time, not forever, and then they're annihilated. Whoa. This was the guy that was preaching hell's best kept secret and a sound biblical gospel. He's now not only changed his eschatology from when he started in the movies Left Behind, but now he questions whether hell is eternal. He makes the case that it's eternal punishment or eternal judgment, but doesn't have to be eternal torment. But wait a minute, doesn't the Bible speak about in Revelation chapter 14, those who take the mark, that the fire of their torment is forever and ever? There's so many verses that use the word forever. I think this is obviously a real problem and a clear sign that we have to get back to following the Bible. Thus saith the Lord, not thus says a former actor.
Our phone number to Crosstalk today is 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. Hopefully have time for a couple more questions here. The caller was dealing with mRNA, and we know, Barbara, that the use of mRNA has been very controversial. Dr. Robert Redfield said in an interview, he said, I really would like to see the mRNA vaccine use curtailed, and personally I'd like to see it eliminated because I think there's too many unknowns. That's a quote from him. He's asking, did the COVID shot, did that have that mRNA in it? What can you tell us?
Well, yes, the COVID shot, biological, I call it a cell disruptor biological, Redfield was the one who made the statement, what the COVID vaccine does is it turns your body into a spike protein production factory. And with their success, Moderna and Pfizer, of rushing this mRNA product to market in the COVID vaccine, they thought that they had a free reign to put all of their eggs in the mRNA technology basket. So a lot of companies around the world are experimenting and creating mRNA-based vaccines for all kinds of diseases. Well, what did Secretary Kennedy do? In July of this year, he pulled $500 million in funding for mRNA vaccine contracts because he knows that there is a problem with this technology, and he's trying to put the brakes on these companies of putting all their eggs in the mRNA technology basket.
Yeah. Including the recent flu shot that we talked about earlier as well.
That's correct.
Yeah. Let's go. Thank you for the call. Our number 800-733-9829. Harlan is calling from Thrusser, Wisconsin. You're on the air.
I'm just curious about the tetanus shots. You know, they've been around for a long, long time. And has there been any serious side effects, or what's the overall rating of the tetanus shots? I'll take the answer off the air.
Great. Thank you, Harlan.
Well, there is risk with the tetanus shot, particularly if you have a certain genetic profile. We know that once you've had a tetanus shot reaction, you are more likely to have a more severe one with a second shot. The shot is only recommended to be given every 10 years, and yet with this tetanus diphtheria acellular pertussis vaccine, TDAP, they keep promoting that in adults. And for pregnant women, they say you've got to have it during every pregnancy. Well, say a woman has 3 babies in 10 years, she's being hyper-immunized with tetanus. So, this is one of the things that you really do need to become educated about it. Now, if you are on a farm, if you live on a farm, you've got farm animals, you've got a bunch of rusty equipment around in your field, and you run around barefoot in the field, you could step on a rusty nail, and if you get a puncture wound and you get no oxygen in that wound, it's a puncture wound. You could get tetanus. Tetanus can be very, very serious. It can give you lockjaw. You can die with terrible seizures. But again, your risk of contracting a disease is a direct proportion to your risk of exposure to it. So if you're living in a penthouse in New York City, your risk of getting tetanus is almost zero.
Appreciate the call. Yeah. Let's go to Merle in Tennessee. Merle, you're on the air.
Yeah, Jim. I just wanted to say I don't think any of this vaccine stuff, from the Wahoo leak to the injuries from the vaccine, I don't believe any of it was a oops. I believe it was all intentional. I mean, you don't have Gates coming out and saying he wants to depopulate and then be so involved in this whole thing. I mean, with the Wuhan lab thing, they were able to take Trump out with it and then, in fact, bring about the depopulation as we're seeing people 39 years old, 45 years old, suddenly, even now in 2025, dying. So, I don't think any of it was an oops, and I really appreciate your guest today.
Great. Thank you so much, Merle. And I know Barbara even talking about that meeting with Gates and many others prior to COVID-19 coming out is putting question marks in many people's minds.
Well, I mean, it is, because they actually held a practice coronavirus pandemic exercise at Johns Hopkins before the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
In other words, there's so much evidence that can cause questions about whether or not this was something that was planned, or whether they knew, at least in the fall of 2019, that there had been a release. Now, whether it was deliberate or whether it was planned, it happened. We know we've got biosecurity problems in these labs. Whether or not it was deliberate or not, I mean, only history will eventually, if we can get the evidence, we'll answer that question.
We have Tanya in Ohio. Tanya, you're on the air.
Yes. Is it true that every single vaccine contains fetal and or animal material?
Every vaccine is not made using aborted fetal tissues, no. The rubella vaccine, I believe, was the first vaccine that used aborted fetal cells. But no, chickenpox vaccine has them also, but not every vaccine. has aborted fetal tissue cells. In terms, there are different types of cell substrates that are used to create vaccines. They do use animal cells in some of the vaccines. They also use armyworm cells in one of the flu vaccines. What they need to do with some of these vaccines is these cell substrates, animal and human, enable them to make the vaccine more quickly. It allows them to grow what they need to grow more quickly, and that's why it's used. But they are moving to this mRNA technology, which does not contain human or animal cell substrates.
Thank you, Tanya. We are out of time. Barbara, we have just a half minute remaining. What would you like to leave with the listeners?
I believe in empowerment through education. I believe we have to take responsibility for the choices we make, but we've got to be allowed to be free to make them. And so my advice is to become educated about this issue, both for yourself personally and your children, but also to take action in your communities. Talk about this issue. Don't be afraid to talk about it. And don't be afraid to get engaged with your state lawmakers so that you don't have to be forced. You aren't forced to take products you don't want to take.
Barbara Lowe Fisher, our guest today, and friends, 2 websites to check out, nvic.org, that's for the National Vaccine Information Center, and nvicadvocacy.org as well, gateway to other sites and articles as well. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Barbara Lowe Fisher is the president of NVIC. And friends, we thank you for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.